I never asked him to walk me home. That's what made it weird at first. Or maybe not weird, just unexpected. His name was Marcus, and for 3 months, he'd been the guy who always seemed to be finishing his workout at the exact same time as me at the gym. We'd exchange nods, the occasional good session when we passed each other in the locker room. That was it. Until the night I left at 9:45 instead of my usual 8:30 and found him waiting by the exit, towel around his neck, looking like he'd been standing there for a while. "Hey," he said. Just that. "Hey." And then he started walking in the same direction I was heading. My apartment was 6 blocks away, through a neighborhood that got progressively quieter after dark. I'd walked it hundreds of times alone. But that night, Marcus fell into step beside me, maintaining this careful distance, like he was orbiting instead of actually walking with me. I should probably mention that I'm not great with unexpected social situations. My brain does this thing where it runs through every possible meaning behind someone's actions, building elaborate theories when the answer is probably much simpler. So I'm walking, and he's walking, and I'm thinking, maybe he just lives in this direction too. Maybe this is a horrible coincidence, and I'm about to discover we're neighbors, which would make the gym situation infinitely more complicated. 3 blocks passed in near silence. Then Marcus said, "I noticed you usually leave earlier. Everything okay?" And the way he said it, there was genuine concern there. Not the fake kind people use when they're fishing for information. I told him I'd stayed late to finish a workout. I'd cut short earlier in the week. He nodded, said that made sense, and we kept walking. When we reached my building, I stopped, expecting him to keep going, to reveal that, yes, he lived further down the street and this had all been a coincidence. Instead, he stopped too, looked at the building, then at me, and said, "Get home safe." Then he turned around and walked back the way we'd come. I stood there, key in hand, watching him disappear into the dark, and felt this strange mixture of confusion and something else I couldn't quite name. It took me 20 minutes of lying in bed, staring at my ceiling, to realize what that feeling was. It was the first time in years I'd felt genuinely cared for by someone who didn't have to care. The next week, I went back to my regular schedule, 8:30 departure, like clockwork. And there was Marcus, waiting by the exit again. This time, I called him out on it. "Do you just stand there every night?" He had the decency to look slightly embarrassed. "Only on weeknights," he said, and I couldn't tell if he was joking. Turned out he wasn't. He'd adjusted his entire workout schedule to finish when I finished. When I asked him why, he said something that's stuck with me ever since. "A few months ago, I watched you help this older guy who'd pulled something in his shoulder. You spent like 20 minutes making sure he was okay, showing him the right form, even though you were clearly in the middle of your own workout. And I thought, that's someone who looks out for people. Figured maybe someone should look out for you, too." I didn't know what to say to that. I'm not used to being seen that way, as someone worth protecting. Growing up, I was always the one doing the protecting, the responsible oldest son the guy friends called when they needed help moving or a ride to the airport or someone to talk them through a breakup. Nobody ever asked if I needed anything. After a while, you stop expecting them to. So Marcus walking me home became our thing. 6 blocks of conversation that started surface level and gradually went deeper. I learned he was a high school teacher, history, and that he'd started working out as a way to deal with the stress of caring for his mom who had early onset dementia. He learned I was an architect who'd recently left a big firm to go freelance, chasing a dream that terrified me daily. We talked about ambition and fear and the strange loneliness of being surrounded by people, but still feeling fundamentally alone. The walks started extending. 6 blocks became 8 as we took longer routes. 8 became stopping for coffee at this 24-hour diner that made terrible coffee but had the best late-night atmosphere. We'd sit in a corner booth, and Marcus would tell me stories about his students, these kids who were struggling with things they couldn't articulate, and I'd see the way his whole face changed when he talked about helping them find their voice. One night, about 2 months into our routine, I asked him the question I'd been avoiding. Why me, though? Really? There are lots of people at that gym. He stirred his coffee for a long time before answering. You're going to think this is stupid, he said, but the first time I saw you, you were doing this thing where you'd finish a set and then just sit there for a minute staring at nothing, and your face had this expression like you were carrying the weight of the entire world and refusing to let anyone see how heavy it was. I recognized that look because I see it in my mirror every morning. Something cracked open in my chest when he said that. I'd spent so long maintaining this image of having everything together, of being the stable one, the reliable one. And here was Marcus, seeing straight through it to the exhausted person underneath. I told him things I'd never told anyone, about the panic attacks I had when I thought about money running out before my business took off, about my father calling my career change, running away from responsibility, about lying awake at 3 a.m. wondering if I'd made a catastrophic mistake. Marcus listened the way few people know how to listen, like every word mattered, like my pain was worth holding space for. When I finally stopped talking, he said, "You're not running away. You're running towards something. That takes more courage than staying put ever could." I almost cried right there in that shitty diner booth. Instead, I laughed, this broken sound that was half sob, and he reached across the table and squeezed my hand, just once, but it was enough. The walks changed after that. We'd gotten comfortable with silence, the kind that feels like companionship instead of awkwardness. Sometimes Marcus would point out constellations, this random knowledge he'd picked up from a student who was obsessed with astronomy. Sometimes I'd talk through design problems I was working on, and he'd ask these questions that somehow always led me to solutions I'd been missing. I started looking forward to those walks more than anything else in my day. The gym became less about the workout and more about what came after. I'd catch myself checking the clock, counting down the minutes until 8:30, and I'd see Marcus doing the same thing across the weight room, our eyes meeting in the mirror. This shared anticipation building. It was Sarah from my boxing class who finally pointed out what should have been obvious. "You know he's in love with you, right?" she said, casual as anything, while we were wrapping our hands. I almost dropped the tape. "What?" "No, we're just friends." She gave me this look, the kind that says, "You're the only person who doesn't see it." Honey, nobody rearranges their entire life to walk someone home every single night unless they're in love. That's not friendship. That's devotion. I spent that entire workout spiraling, because once she said it, I couldn't unsee it. The way Marcus always positioned himself on the outside of the sidewalk, putting himself between me and the street. How he'd memorized my coffee order, my schedule, the names of my clients. The time he'd shown up with soup when I mentioned having a cold, or how he'd helped me move furniture for a photo shoot without being asked. But more than that, I had to confront what I'd been carefully not examining about my own feelings. The way my chest felt lighter the moment I saw him waiting. How I'd started choosing shirts I thought he'd like. The fact that I'd turned down 3 different date offers in the past month because none of them were Marcus, and spending time with anyone else felt like settling for less. That night, the walk home was torture. Every step felt loaded with meaning I was finally allowing myself to acknowledge. We got to my building, the place where Marcus usually said goodnight and turned back. But this time I didn't want him to leave. I didn't want to spend another night alone when everything I needed was standing right in front of me. "Do you want to come up?" I asked. My voice sounded strange, vulnerable in a way I wasn't used to. Marcus looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw something shift in his expression. Hope, maybe, or fear. Probably both. Yeah, he said quietly. I really do. We climbed the 3 flights to my apartment in silence. I fumbled with my keys, hyper-aware of Marcus standing close behind me, his presence solid and warm. Inside, I turned on lights, offered water, did all the normal host things while my heart tried to beat its way out of my chest. Marcus stood in my living room looking at the architectural sketches on my walls, the models I'd built, the evidence of the life I was trying to create. I need to tell you something, I said, before I could lose my nerve. And I need you to let me get it all out before you respond, because if I stop, I won't be able to start again. He nodded, gave me his full attention in that way he had. I took a breath. I've been alone for a long time, not just single, but alone in the way that matters. And I convinced myself I was okay with that I didn't need anyone, that needing someone was weakness. Then you started walking me home, and everything changed. You changed everything. And I'm terrified because I don't know how to do this, how to let someone in, how to be the person who needs instead of the person who's needed. Marcus crossed the room slowly, deliberately, giving me space to back away if I wanted to. I didn't want to. He stopped close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, could feel the warmth radiating from his body. Can I tell you something now? He asked. I nodded. I'm terrified too. Every single night, walking you home, I'm terrified you'll figure out how much I care and it'll scare you away, because you're this brilliant, talented, beautiful person who could have anyone, and I'm just a high school teacher who rearranged his life for the chance to spend 20 minutes a day with you. Just, I repeated. Marcus, you're the kindest person I've ever met. You see people, really see them, when everyone else is looking past them. You've made me feel less alone than I've felt in years. That's not just anything. He reached up slowly, giving me time to move away, and cupped my face in his hand. His palm was warm, slightly rough, and I leaned into the touch without thinking. I want to kiss you, he said. I've wanted to kiss you for months, but I need to know that's what you want too. Instead of answering with words, I closed the distance between us. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, both of us learning the shape of this new thing we were creating. Then Marcus's other hand came up to my face, and I gripped his shirt, pulling him closer, and the kiss deepened into something that felt like coming home after a long journey. We broke apart, breathing hard, foreheads pressed together. Stay, I whispered, not just tonight, stay. Marcus pulled back just enough to look at me, and his eyes were bright with unshed tears. I'm not going anywhere, he promised. I haven't been going anywhere for months. I've been right here, waiting for you to be ready. We spent that night on my couch, talking until the sun started to rise, wrapped around each other like we were afraid to let go. Marcus told me about the first time he'd seen me, how I'd been so focused on my workout that I hadn't noticed him staring. I told him about all the times I'd wanted to ask him to stay, but talked myself out of it. We mapped out the history of our almost relationship. All the moments we'd been too afraid to name what was happening between us. The next morning we went to the gym together, worked out side by side instead of in our separate corners. And when 8:30 rolled around, we walked home together, but this time Marcus held my hand. 6 blocks of us together, visible in a way we hadn't been before. That was 8 months ago. Marcus still walks me home every night, but now he stays. My apartment became our apartment, his books mixed with my sketches, his terrible taste in morning television balanced against my need for quiet. We figured out how to be 2 people who'd been alone for too long, learning how to be together. Last week, I was working late on a project, stressed and exhausted, and Marcus brought me tea without being asked, set it down next to my laptop, kissed the top of my head, and went back to grading papers. Such a small thing, but it made me stop and realize how much had changed. I wasn't carrying the weight alone anymore. I had someone who saw when I was struggling and showed up consistently without fanfare or expectation of praise. I asked him once why he kept walking me home even now, when he could just wait for me upstairs. He said, because that's when you decompress. That's when you process your day and transition from work mode to home mode. I want to be part of that. I want to be there for all of it, not just the easy parts. That's what love is, I think, not the grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It's someone rearranging their life to walk you home. It's being seen, fully seen, and not turning away. It's finding someone who carries their own weight and choosing to help carry theirs anyway. It's terrifying and beautiful and worth every moment of fear it took to get here. Sometimes I think about that first night, Marcus waiting by the gym exit, me confused and slightly annoyed by this disruption to my routine. I think about how close I came to telling him I didn't need an escort, that I was fine on my own. I was fine on my own, but fine isn't the same as happy. Fine isn't the same as held. Fine isn't the same as loved. So yeah, the guy from my gym started walking me home, even when I didn't ask. And it turns out that was exactly what I needed. Someone who saw that I needed something before I could admit it to myself. Someone patient enough to wait for me to catch up to what he already knew. Someone brave enough to show up night after night, until I was brave enough to let him stay. Total jar count, 16,847.